wedding veil trembled in Adana's hands as she stared at the crumpled photograph hidden beneath her jewelry box, a picture that shouldn't exist, of a man who looked exactly like her groom standing beside another woman in wedding attire, 3 hours before her own ceremony. The morning sun streamed through the wooden shutters of her family's compound in Enugu, casting dancing shadows across the red mud walls. Outside, the sound of pestles striking mortar echoed as her aunties prepared the feast. Thump, 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 like a drumbeat counting down to something she couldn't name. The air hung thick with the smell of palm oil and bitter leaf soup, but underneath it all, something felt wrong, something that made her stomach twist. Adana had found the photograph by accident, wedged between old letters in the wooden box her grandmother had left her. Now she held it up to the light, her fingers shaking. The man in the picture wore the same crooked smile she'd fallen in love with 6 months ago, the same gentle eyes that had promised her the world. But the woman beside him, the woman wore a wedding dress. "Adana, where are you, my daughter?" Her mother's voice rang across the courtyard, sharp with the stress of wedding preparations. "The photographer is here." She shoved the photograph under her wrapper and called back, "Coming, Mama." But her feet wouldn't move. From the kitchen came the chatter of her cousins, their voices bright with excitement. She could hear them arguing over who would catch the bouquet, who would dance with which uncle, who would get the biggest piece of cake. Normal wedding morning sounds. Happy sounds. So why did everything feel like a lie? The photograph burned against her thigh where she'd hidden it. She pulled it out again, studying the woman's face. Pretty, with the kind of quiet beauty that made men stare, the kind Adana had always wished she possessed, instead of her own bold features and loud laugh. "Child, what are you doing in there?" Mama's footsteps approached the door. "Your groom's family will arrive soon. And you're not even dressed." Just getting ready, Mama." Through the thin walls, she could hear her father's booming voice directing the men as they arranged chairs under the big Iroko tree. Papa had been so proud when Chike had asked for her hand. A university graduate, he told everyone who would listen. An engineer with a good job in Lagos. My Adana has chosen well. But what if she hadn't? Adana looked at herself in the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. Her wedding dress, white lace imported from Lagos at great expense, hung on a wooden peg, waiting. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever owned. Her mother had cried when they picked it out at the market. A knock at the door made her jump. "Ada?" The voice was soft, familiar. Her best friend Ngozi slipped inside, her head wrapped in a bright blue jelly that matched her wrapper. "Why aren't you?" She stopped when she saw Adana's face. "What's wrong?" For a moment, Adana almost showed her the photograph, almost whispered her fears. But then she looked at Ngozi's excited face, thought of all the money spent, all the guests traveling from far villages, all the expectations resting on this day. "Nothing," she said, forcing a smile. "Just nervous." Ngozi laughed and sat beside her on the narrow bed. "Every bride gets nervous. You remember when my sister married? She threw up 3 times before the ceremony. But look at her now, 4 children and happy as a marketplace queen." "Yes," Adana whispered, "every bride gets nervous." But as Ngozi helped her into the wedding dress, chattering about how beautiful she looked and how lucky she was to marry such a handsome, successful man, Adana couldn't shake the feeling that luck had nothing to do with what was coming. The photograph remained hidden in her wrapper, pressed against her skin like a secret that refused to stay buried. Outside, the drums were starting, deep, rhythmic beats that called the whole village to witness her joy. Soon, Chike would arrive with his groomsmen, dressed in his finest agbada, ready to make her his wife. But whose husband was he already? As her mother burst through the door with tears of happiness in her eyes, as her aunties began the traditional wedding songs, as the whole compound filled with laughter and celebration, Adana smiled and played her part, the perfect bride, marrying the perfect groom, with the perfect secret burning like fire between them, and somewhere in the distance, she swore she could hear her grandmother's voice whispering the old warning. When the foundation is crooked, even the strongest house will fall. The sound of car horns and praise singers announced Chike's arrival like thunder before a storm. Adana pressed the photograph deeper into her wrapper as the compound erupted in celebration. Through her window, she watched a convoy of black cars pull up to the gates, sleek vehicles that gleamed in the morning sun like beetles fresh from rain. Dust swirled as doors slammed and men emerged, their crisp white agbadas flowing like clouds against the red earth. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Ada, come see how handsome your husband looks." Ngozi grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the window. "Ah, that man is fine like fresh pepper soup." But Adana barely heard her friend's excited chatter. Her eyes found Chike immediately, tall, broad-shouldered, his smile bright enough to light up the entire compound. He moved with the confidence of a man who owned every room he entered, greeting her father with elaborate handshakes, embracing her uncles like long-lost brothers. The same man from the photograph, the same lying smile. "Look at his groomsmen," Ngozi continued, practically bouncing on her toes. "All of them university boys. Your children will be brilliant." Adana watched as Chike's best man, a short, stocky fellow with quick eyes, whispered something in his ear. Whatever he said made Chike's smile falter for just a moment. Just long enough for Adana to catch the flash of something darker underneath. Fear? Guilt? "Sister Adana?" Her little cousin Emeka burst through the door without knocking, his school uniform wrinkled and his face shining with sweat. "Papa said I should tell you. The groom brought gifts, big ones." Through the window, she could see them unloading wooden crates from the car boots. Her aunties clapped and ululated as each box was carried into the compound. Palm wine, yams, bolts of expensive fabric, suitcases that probably contained jewelry and money. The bride price was impressive. Overwhelming, even. Too much, her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory. When a man pays too much too quickly, he's trying to buy silence, not love. "Adana, come." Her mother's voice cut through her thoughts. "Your husband wants to greet you properly before the ceremony." Her stomach dropped. Face him now? With the photograph burning against her skin like an accusation? But refusal wasn't an option. Not with the whole compound watching. She followed Ngozi and Emeka outside, her bare feet silent on the packed earth. The morning air was thick with the smell of cooking meat and the sweet perfume of frangipani flowers. But underneath it all, she caught something else, the metallic scent of her own fear. The crowd parted as she approached. Chike stood near the big iroko tree, surrounded by well-wishers, but his eyes found hers immediately. For a heartbeat, the noise and celebration faded away. It was just them, separated by 10 feet of dusty ground and a secret that felt like a chasm. "My beautiful wife," he said, his voice carrying across the compound. The words should have made her heart sing. Instead, they felt like chains. He stepped forward, his arms outstretched, and she had no choice but to walk into his embrace. His cologne, expensive, foreign, filled her nose as he held her, too tight, too long, like a man desperate to convince the world of something. "You look radiant," he murmured into her ear, so softly only she could hear. "I am the luckiest man in all of Nigeria." But when he pulled back to look at her, she saw it again, that flicker of something desperate in his eyes, the look of a man carrying weight he couldn't share. "Thank you," she managed, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. Her father appeared at her elbow, beaming with pride. "Chike, my son, you have brought honor to both our families today. My daughter is precious, but I know you will treasure her." "More than my own life, sir." Chike's response came quickly, perfectly rehearsed. He placed his hand over his heart in the traditional gesture of sincerity, but Adana noticed his other hand, hidden from her father's view. His fingers drummed nervously against his thigh. Tap, tap, tap. The only sign that his calm exterior might be cracking. The best man appeared at his shoulder again, whispering urgently. This time, Chike's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Is everything all right?" Adana's father asked, noticing the exchange. "Of course." Chike's smile snapped back into place like a mask. "My friend here just wants to make sure we stay on schedule. You know how Lagos people are about time." Everyone laughed, but Adana didn't miss the sharp look that passed between the two men, or the way the best man's eyes swept the crowd like a man watching for threats. "Well then," Papa clapped his hands together. "Let us begin. The sun grows high, and love waits for no one. As the crowd began moving toward the ceremonial area under the tree, Chike caught her hand. His palm was damp with sweat. Adana, he said quietly, his voice different now, softer, more vulnerable. I want you to know, whatever happens today, whatever you might hear or see, I care for you, truly. The words should have been romantic. Instead, they sounded like a warning or an apology in advance. Before she could respond, he was pulled away by the surge of guests and family members eager to start the ceremony. She watched him go, noting how he kept glancing over his shoulder, not at her, but at the road beyond the compound gates, as if he expected someone else to arrive. Someone he didn't want to see. Drums stopped. Adana's heart hammered against her ribs as silence fell across the compound like a heavy blanket. Through the window, she could see her father adjusting his best agbada, the gold embroidery catching the afternoon sun. The guests had filled every corner of the courtyard, aunties in their finest wrappers, uncles arguing loudly about politics, children weaving between the chairs like busy ants. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked wrong. They're here, Ngozi whispered, pressing her face to the other window. Oh my God, Ada, look at that convoy! 3 black cars rolled slowly through the compound gates, dust swirling behind them like smoke signals. The lead car, a gleaming Mercedes that probably cost more than her father made in 5 years, came to a stop under the Iroko tree. Car doors slammed in sequence, sharp cracks that made her jump. Then she saw him. Chike stepped out of the Mercedes wearing a pristine white agbada that made him look like a prince. His shoes, Italian leather she could tell from here, caught the light as he walked. Behind him came his groomsmen, all dressed in matching purple, all carrying themselves with the easy confidence of Lagos money. He's so handsome, Ngozi sighed. Girl, you won the lottery. But Adana was watching something else. The way Chike's eyes swept the crowd, quick and calculating. The way he paused when he spoke to his best man, their voices too low to hear, but their gestures urgent. And strangest of all, the way he kept checking his phone. Who checks their phone at their own traditional wedding? The photograph in her wrapper seemed to burn hotter. Ada, come away from the window, her mother called from the doorway. It's bad luck for the groom to see you before the ceremony. As she stepped back, Adana caught sight of movement near the compound wall. A woman in a dark wrapper stood in the shadows between 2 buildings, too far away to see clearly, but close enough to feel wrong. The woman wasn't moving toward the celebration. She was just watching. Mama, Adana said slowly, who is that woman by the wall? Her mother glanced out, squinting. What woman? I don't see anyone. Adana looked again. The shadows were empty. Nothing, she murmured. I thought I saw. Pre-wedding nerves, Mama said firmly, bustling over with a small calabash. Here, drink this. Your grandmother's recipe for courage. The liquid smelled of bitter herbs and honey, sharp enough to make her eyes water. As Adana sipped the mixture, trying not to grimace, she heard voices rising from the courtyard below. Her father's deep laugh boomed above the rest, followed by what sounded like Chike's response. They were probably discussing the bride price, the traditional negotiations that would seal the marriage. But then she heard something else. A woman's voice, clear and carrying. Surprised he chose to marry so soon after. The voice was cut off by someone else speaking louder, drowning out the rest of the sentence. Adana strained to listen, but all she could catch were fragments. Lagos, complications, better this way. What are they talking about? She asked Ngozi. Probably just the usual wedding gossip, Ngozi shrugged, adjusting Adana's veil. You know how people talk. They see a successful man marrying quickly, and they invent stories. But the knot in Adana's stomach was growing tighter. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It's time, her father called. The ceremonies are beginning. As they prepared to leave the room, Adana caught her reflection in the mirror one last time. She looked beautiful. Everyone would say so. The dress fit perfectly. The veil framed her face like a dream. Her makeup hid the sleepless circles under her eyes. She looked like every bride was supposed to look. Happy, radiant, sure. Wait, she said suddenly. Ngozi paused at the door. What is it? I need a moment with Chike before the ceremony. Ada, you can't. Just 5 minutes. Please. Her mother frowned from the doorway. Tradition says, I don't care what tradition says. The words came out sharper than she intended. I need to ask him something, something important. The room went quiet. Even from outside, the celebration seemed to dim, as if the compound itself was holding its breath. Her mother's eyes narrowed with the kind of maternal instinct that could smell trouble from 3 villages away. What kind of something? Adana's hand moved to her wrapper, where the photograph waited. For a moment, she almost pulled it out, almost ended this charade right here, right now. But then she looked at her mother's face, saw the pride there, the joy, the dreams of a better life for her daughter, saw her father's investment, the guests' expectations, the weight of 2 families joining together. Just bride things, she whispered. Her mother studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 5 minutes, no more, and you cannot let him see you fully. It's still bad luck. As they made their way toward the courtyard, Adana's mind raced. What would she say? How do you ask the man you're about to marry if he's already married to someone else? How do you hold up a photograph and ask him to explain it without destroying everything? The drums started again as they approached the celebration, deep rhythmic beats that seemed to match her racing heart. But underneath the music, she swore she could hear her grandmother's voice again, whispering warnings about secrets and lies and the price of ignoring the truth. And somewhere in the crowd ahead, Chike was waiting. Handsome, charming, successful Chike, with his perfect smile and his Italian shoes and his mysterious past. The woman in the photograph was still a ghost between them. But ghosts, Adana was learning, had a way of becoming real when you least expected it. The woman stood at the edge of the wedding crowd, like a storm cloud on a sunny day, her eyes fixed on Chike with the intensity of a hunter watching prey. Adana felt her breath catch as she recognized the face from the photograph, the same delicate features, the same quiet beauty that had haunted her morning preparations. But now, seeing her in person, there was nothing quiet about the fury burning in those dark eyes. The drums continued their joyful rhythm, drowning out the whispered conversations spreading through the gathered guests like wildfire. The smell of jollof rice and fried plantain hung heavy in the afternoon air, mixing with the sweet perfume of frangipani flowers and something else, something sharp and bitter that made Adana's stomach turn. She stood frozen beside Chike at the altar, her hands still clasped in his as the pastor droned on about love and faithfulness. The irony wasn't lost on her. Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper into her chest. Do you see her? She whispered, barely moving her lips. Chika followed her gaze and his face went pale beneath his dark skin. The confident smile he'd worn all day cracked like old paint. His palm grew slick with sweat against hers. I don't know who you mean, he stammered, but his voice betrayed him. The woman began walking closer, her wrapper swishing with each determined step. Guests turned to stare, their conversations dying one by one until an uncomfortable silence settled over the compound. Even the children stopped their games to watch. Mama noticed first. Who is that woman? She hissed to Papa, but her voice carried further than intended. And do you, Chike Okafor, the pastor continued, oblivious to the drama unfolding, take Adana to be your lawfully wedded wife? Stop! The single word cut through the ceremony like a machete through palm fronds. Every head turned toward the woman who had spoken. She stood just 10 feet away now, close enough for Adana to see the tears threatening to spill from her eyes, close enough to smell the desperation rolling off her in waves. Please, Chike whispered, his hand tightening on Adana's like a drowning man clutching driftwood. Not here. Not now. When then? The woman's voice rose, clear and sharp. After you make another woman your wife? After you abandon another child? The word child hit the crowd like lightning. Gasps rippled through the assembled guests. Adana felt the world tilt beneath her feet, the colorful decorations and smiling faces blurring into a kaleidoscope of confusion. What is she talking about? Adana's voice came out smaller than she intended, almost lost in the sudden chaos of whispered conversations and shocked exclamations. The woman stepped forward, her chin raised with the dignity of someone who had nothing left to lose. My name is Obioma Nkene. 3 years ago, your husband-to-be married me in a ceremony just like this one. We have a son together. His name is Ikenna, and he's 2 years old. The pastor's Bible hit the ground with a dull thud. Chika's mother let out a wail that could have wakened the ancestors. Chineke, what is this madness? But it was Papa's reaction that scared Adana most. The big man who had never backed down from any challenge stood perfectly still, his face carved from stone, his eyes burning with a fury that made the afternoon sun seem cold. Is this true? Papa's voice was quiet, deadly calm, the kind of quiet that came before hurricanes. Chike opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air on dry land. No words came. Obioma reached into her handbag and pulled out a bundle of papers, certificates, photographs, documents that rustled like dry leaves in her trembling hands. I have the marriage certificate. I have pictures of our wedding. I have his birth certificate with Chike's name as the father. She threw the papers at his feet. I came here to stop this madness before he destroys another family the way he destroyed mine. The silence stretched like a taut rope, ready to snap. Adana stared down at the scattered papers, seeing her dreams crumble into dust. The white wedding dress that had felt like armor this morning now felt like a burial shroud. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried. Where is he? Adana heard herself ask. Her voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. Where is your son? Obioma's composure finally broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pointed toward the compound gate, where a small boy sat in an old woman's lap, his eyes wide with confusion at the adult drama unfolding before him. He had Chike's nose, his father's gentle eyes. And suddenly, Adana understood why the photograph had been hidden away like a guilty secret. When a man plants seeds in 2 gardens, her grandmother had always said, neither harvest will be sweet. Now she knew exactly what that meant. The church doors slammed shut behind Adana with a sound like thunder, leaving her alone in the dusty courtyard with the photograph trembling in her hands. She had run, in front of 300 guests, in her grandmother's wedding dress, like a woman possessed by spirits. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, turning her white lace into a prison of heat and sweat. Behind the heavy wooden doors, she could hear the chaos erupting, voices raised in confusion, her mother's wails of shame, the scraping of chairs as people rose to their feet. But all of that felt far away now, like sounds from another world. What felt real was the photograph. And the woman who had pressed it into her palm just moments before she was supposed to say, I do. You should know the truth, the stranger had whispered, appearing at Adana's side like smoke. Before it's too late. Now Adana stared at the image that had destroyed everything. Chike in a different suit, a younger face, standing beside a woman in traditional Igbo wedding attire. The woman's smile was radiant, her hands adorned with intricate henna, her wrapper the deep blue of royalty. And at the bottom, written in fading ink, Chike and Amara, October 2019. 2 years ago. 2 years before he'd ever met Adana. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto the church steps, not caring that her dress would stain with red earth. The taste of bile burned in her throat. Everything she thought she knew crumbled like dried palm leaves in harmattan wind. Adana! She looked up to see Chike bursting through the church doors, his agbada flowing behind him like the wings of a guilty bird. His face, that handsome face she'd kissed goodnight just yesterday, was twisted with panic. My love, what happened? Why did you? He stopped when he saw the photograph in her hands. The color drained from his cheeks like water from a broken calabash. Who is she? Adana's voice came out as a whisper, but it cut through the air like a machete. Chike's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. For 5 long seconds, the only sound was the distant buzz of confusion from inside the church, punctuated by her mother's increasingly frantic voice calling her name. Adana, I can explain. Who is she? This time she screamed it, rising to her feet with her dress billowing around her like a storm cloud. She was a mistake. The words fell from his lips like stones. A foolish mistake from my youth. A mistake? Adana held up the photograph, her hands shaking so violently the image blurred. This looks like a wedding, Chica. Not a mistake, a wedding. Behind them, the church doors creaked open. Adana turned to see her father's weathered face appear, his Sunday suit rumpled with worry. Papa's eyes took in the scene. His daughter's tear-streaked face, the man he'd welcomed as a son backing away with guilt written across his features, the photograph that had brought their perfect day crashing down. What is this? Papa's voice carried the authority of a man who had settled village disputes for 30 years. What is happening here? Chike straightened, trying to summon the confidence that had charmed them all 6 months ago. Papa, please, let me explain to your daughter. Explain what? Papa's eyes had found the photograph now. He moved closer, squinting in the harsh sunlight. When recognition dawned on his face, it was like watching a man age 10 years in 10 seconds. This is you, in wedding clothes, with another woman. It wasn't a question. Papa, it was annulled, Chika said quickly, the words tumbling over each other. The marriage was annulled. It doesn't count. In the eyes of God and law, I am free to marry. Annulled? Adana's voice cracked. When? The silence that followed was deafening. Even the sounds from inside the church seemed to fade away. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell was ringing, marking another couple's happy beginning while theirs crumbled into dust. When, Chike? She repeated, her voice gaining strength like a gathering storm. Last month, he whispered. The world tilted. Adana grabbed the church wall to keep from falling. Last month. While he was choosing flowers for their reception, while he was promising her a honeymoon in Abuja, while he was lying in her bed, whispering about their future children. You were married. Last month, you were still married. Her voice was flat now, dead. To someone else. Papa stepped forward, his face darkening like the sky before a rainfall. Young man, are you telling me that you came to my house, ate my food, slept under my roof, and asked for my daughter's hand while you were married to another woman? Papa, please, answer me. The church doors burst open fully now, and Adana's mother appeared, followed by a stream of relatives and guests. Mama's face was streaked with tears, her expensive gel askew on her head. Behind her, Adana could see Uncle Emeka, Aunt Patience, cousins from 3 villages over, family friends who had traveled from Lagos for this wedding, all of them staring, all of them witnessing her shame. Adana, child, come inside, Mama pleaded. Whatever this is, we can fix it. Come inside and... He's already married, Mama. The words came out steady and clear, carrying across the courtyard like the call of a town crier. Our groom is already married. The gasps that followed were like a wind rushing through dry grass. Mama's hand flew to her chest. Uncle Emeka's face went dark with rage. Aunt Patience began muttering prayers under her breath. But it was the woman who stepped out from behind the crowd that made Adana's heart stop completely. She was beautiful in the way that makes other women feel plain. Tall and elegant, with skin like polished ebony and eyes that held secrets. She wore a simple blue dress, but she carried herself like royalty. And when she spoke, her voice was soft but clear enough for everyone to hear. Actually, she said, looking directly at Chike, we're not married anymore. As of 3 days ago, our divorce was finalized. Chike's face went white as bone. But I thought you should all know, the woman continued, her gaze moving to Adana with something that might have been pity, that he left our marriage bed to court your daughter, while I was carrying his child. The photograph slipped from Adana's numb fingers and fluttered to the ground like a dying butterfly. And in the terrible silence that followed, she could hear her grandmother's voice again, clearer than ever. When a man shows you his true face, believe him the first time. The silence in the compound felt like death itself had visited. Adana sat on the red earth where she'd collapsed, her white wedding dress now stained with dust and shame. The guests had scattered like chickens before a hawk, some running to their cars, others huddling in groups, whispering behind cupped hands. The drums had stopped. Even the children had gone quiet. Only the sound of her own ragged breathing filled the air. Her mother knelt beside her, but didn't touch her. Couldn't touch her. The disgrace was too fresh, too raw. Adana, Mama whispered, her voice broken. What have you done to our family? The question hit harder than any slap. Adana looked up through tear-blurred eyes at the faces surrounding her. Her father stood with his back turned, his shoulders shaking with rage or grief. She couldn't tell which. Her aunties clutched their wrappers tighter, as if shame was something that could spread through cloth. Uncle Emeka, who'd driven 5 hours from Abba for the wedding, was already walking toward his car. "I didn't know," she said, but the words came out as a croak. "I swear I didn't know he was already married." "But you knew something." Ngozi's voice cut through the air like a blade. Her best friend stood at the edge of the crowd, still in her bridesmaid's dress, but her face had changed. Cold, distant. "The way you've been acting all week, you knew something was wrong." Adana wanted to deny it, but the words died in her throat. Because Ngozi was right. The strange phone calls Chike never answered in front of her. The way he'd always been vague about his life in Lagos, the photograph she'd found that morning, hidden like a guilty secret in her grandmother's box. She'd known. Deep down, she'd known. "Where is he?" Papa's voice was low, dangerous. He turned slowly, and Adana saw her strong father's face transformed by fury. "Where is this liar who has destroyed my daughter's honor?" "Gone." The word came from one of Chike's groomsmen, Kalechi, who'd stayed behind when the others fled. He stood with his hands raised, as if Papa might strike him instead. "He left with his family. They're driving back to Lagos." The coward hadn't even stayed to face what he'd done. A low moan escaped from deep in Adana's chest. She pressed her face into her hands, feeling the weight of 500 eyes judging her. In the distance, she could hear car engines starting. More guests leaving, running from the scandal like it might contaminate them. "Mama," she whispered, "what do I do now?" But when she looked up, her mother's face was closed like a door. "I don't know, Adana. I honestly don't know." The women of the compound began moving with grim purpose, clearing away the wedding decorations like they were cleaning up after a funeral. The beautiful flower arrangements her cousins had spent days preparing were bundled into baskets. The white ribbons were torn down. The feast, enough food for 3 villages, would feed only the few relatives too loyal or too poor to leave. Mrs. Okafor, the neighborhood gossip, leaned close to her friend. "I always said that boy was too smooth. No good man is that perfect." "Shh," the other woman replied. "The girl will hear you." But Adana heard everything, every whisper, every judgment, every prediction of her ruined future. "No man will want her now," someone said. "Not after this shame. Her father spent his life savings on this wedding. The whole village will remember this day." Each word was a stone thrown at her chest. She pulled her knees up and tried to make herself smaller, invisible. But there was nowhere to hide from the truth that burned brighter than the afternoon sun. She was ruined. In a village where a woman's worth was measured by her marriage, by her ability to choose well and be chosen, she had failed completely, publicly, spectacularly. Her father's friend, Mr. Ikenna, approached with careful steps. "Brother," he said to Papa, perhaps it's better this way. Better to discover the snake before it bites." Papa's laugh was bitter as cassava root. Easy words when it's not your daughter sitting in the dust. The sun was beginning to set, painting the compound in shades of orange and gold. Soon, darkness would fall. The guests would finish leaving. The decorations would be gone, and she would still be here, wearing a wedding dress that meant nothing, carrying the weight of a scandal that would follow her like a shadow. Ngozi walked over slowly, her footsteps uncertain. She sat down beside Adana in the dirt, not caring about her beautiful bridesmaid's dress. For a moment, they sat in silence like they used to as children. "Ada," Ngozi said softly, "do you remember what your grandmother used to say? About the palm tree?" Adana's throat was too tight to speak, so she just nodded. "She said the palm tree bends in the storm, but it doesn't break, because its roots go deep." "My roots feel ripped up," Adana whispered. Ngozi took her hand, the first person to touch her since the world collapsed. "Then we plant new ones." But even as her friend tried to comfort her, Adana could see the truth in everyone's eyes. Some storms were too strong, some shame too deep, some wounds that never quite heal. As the last of the guests drove away, their headlights cutting through the gathering darkness, Adana wondered if she would ever feel whole again. The wedding that was supposed to be the happiest day of her life had become the day she learned that some secrets are buried so deep they can destroy you when they finally surface. And somewhere on the road to Lagos, Chike was probably already planning his next lie. Adana's bag sat by the compound gate like two abandoned children, everything she owned in the world reduced to a few bundles of cloth and broken dreams. The morning after the wedding disaster, her father wouldn't even look at her. He sat under the Iroko tree where just yesterday guests had celebrated, his face carved from stone, his silence more cutting than any words. The leftover decorations hung like funeral shrouds, wilted flowers and torn streamers, mocking what should have been the happiest day of her life. "Papa," she whispered, approaching his chair with careful steps. The red dust clung to her bare feet, and she could still taste the bitter herbs Mama had forced down her throat at dawn. "To cleanse the shame," she'd said. He turned his head away. "Papa, please, let me explain. There is nothing to explain." His voice came out cracked and hollow. "The whole village saw. The whole village knows my daughter is a destroyer of homes." The words hit her chest like stones. In the distance, she could hear the market women chattering as they passed by the compound wall. Their voices carried on the morning breeze, sharp with gossip and judgment. She caught fragments. That girl. Poor man's wife. What kind of woman? Her mother emerged from the house, moving like a woman who had aged 10 years overnight. The bright wrapper she'd worn for the wedding was replaced by black cloth as if she were mourning a death. In a way, Adana supposed she was. "The bus to Lagos leaves at noon," Mama said without looking at her. "Your Aunt Falake will take you in. For now." "Mama, don't call me that." The words came out strangled. "Not until you fix what you have broken." Adana felt something crack inside her chest. Yesterday, she had been the beloved daughter, the pride of the family, the girl who was going to marry well and bring honor to their name. Today, she was nothing, less than nothing. A shadow fell across the compound. Chike stood at the gate, still wearing his wedding agbada, but with the joy ripped out of it. His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. Behind him, she could see his cousins waiting by a car, their faces hard with anger. "Adana," he called out, his voice breaking on her name. "Please, we need to talk." Her father stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled. "You dare come here? Uncle, please, there's been a mistake." "The only mistake," Papa's voice boomed across the compound, "was thinking you were a man of honor." Chike flinched like he'd been slapped. "I can explain everything, if you would just listen." "Explain?" Papa laughed, but it was the sound of something dying. "Explain how you have a wife in Lagos? Explain how you made my daughter into a laughingstock? Explain how the whole village now thinks we are fools who cannot even check the background of their daughter's husband." The market women had stopped walking. They gathered by the compound wall like vultures, feeding on the drama. Adana could feel their eyes on her skin, their whispered judgments crawling over her like insects. "It's not what it looks like," Chike said, but his voice carried no conviction. "Oluchi and I, we were separated. The marriage was over in everything but papers." "Papers." Papa spat into the dust. "Papers that make you a liar and my daughter a homewrecker." Adana wanted to speak, to defend herself, to scream that she had been deceived too, but the words stuck in her throat like thorns. What was the point? Who would believe her now? Her youngest brother Emeka peered out from behind the house, his school uniform wrinkled, his face confused. He was only 12. Yesterday he'd been so proud, telling his friends his sister was getting married to an important man from Lagos. Today he would learn what shame felt like. "Adana." Chike took a step forward, and she saw something desperate in his eyes. "Come with me. We can go to Lagos together, start fresh. I'll divorce Oluchi properly, and we can—" "And make her a second wife?" Papa's voice cut through the air like a machete. "You think my daughter is so cheap?" The bus horn sounded in the distance, long, mournful blasts announcing its approach to the village. Her transportation to exile. Her escape to a life she didn't want in a city that would swallow her whole. Mama picked up the smaller bag and thrust it into Adana's arms. The weight of it, clothes, a few family photos, her grandmother's jewelry, felt like carrying her entire collapsed world. "The bus," Mama said simply. Adana looked at her father one last time. Yesterday, This man had walked her down the aisle with tears of pride in his eyes. Today, he couldn't bear to see her face. "Papa," she whispered. "I didn't know." For just a moment, his stone mask cracked. She saw pain there, disappointment deeper than the well behind their house. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold stranger she no longer recognized. "A wise woman builds her house," he said quietly, quoting the old proverb, "but a foolish one tears it down with her own hands." The words followed her as she walked toward the gate, past Chike, who reached for her arm, past the gossiping women who fell silent as she passed, past the Iroko tree where her dreams had died. At the compound entrance, she turned back once. Her family home looked smaller somehow, as if her disgrace had shrunk it. Her mother stood in the doorway like a ghost, and her father remained under his tree, staring at nothing. The bus appeared around the bend, kicking up red dust that hung in the air like a curtain between her old life and whatever came next. As she climbed aboard with her bags, finding a seat among strangers who didn't know her shame, Adana realized the cruelest truth of all. Yesterday, she had lost a husband she'd never really had, but today, she had lost the family that had been hers forever. Adana's bare feet found purchase on the slippery rocks as she climbed toward the old shrine hidden deep in the forest behind her village. The moon hung like a broken calabash in the sky, casting silver light through the palm fronds that whispered secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. 3 days had passed since the wedding disaster. 3 days of hiding and shame, while the whole village talked about the mad bride who destroyed her own ceremony. But tonight, everything would change. The photograph, now wrinkled and tear-stained, crumpled in her sweaty palm as she pushed through the thick bush. Thorns caught at her wrapper, drawing thin lines of blood on her arms, but she didn't stop. Behind her, she could hear Ngozi struggling to keep up, breathing hard from the climb. "Ada, please," Ngozi whispered, her voice shaky. "This is madness. What if someone sees us? What if the spirits—" "Let them see," Adana said, not turning around. "Let the whole world see. I'm tired of being afraid." The shrine appeared suddenly, a small clearing where ancient stones formed a circle around a gnarled Iroko tree. Her grandmother had brought her here as a child, teaching her the old prayers, the old ways of asking for truth when the world was full of lies. Candle wax from 100 offerings coated the stones like frozen tears. Adana knelt in the center and pulled out the item she'd gathered, a white cock that struggled weakly in the cloth sack, palm wine in her father's oldest calabash, and cola nuts blessed by the oldest woman in their village. Her hands shook as she arranged them on the ground. "Grandmother," she whispered to the darkness, "you always said the ancestors would help those brave enough to ask. Well, I'm asking now." Ngozi crouched beside her, eyes wide with fear and something that might have been admiration. "What are you going to do?" "Find the truth." Adana's voice was steadier than she felt. "That woman in the photograph, she's real. I know it. I can feel it in my bones like rain coming. But I need proof. Real proof that even Chike can't lie his way out of." She poured the palm wine in a circle around the stones, the sweet smell mixing with the earthy scent of night-blooming flowers. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. From her wrapper, she pulled out something else, Chike's gold chain, the one he'd forgotten in his rush to leave after the wedding disaster. She'd found it tangled in the bedsheets where he'd slept before the ceremony. Now she held it over the flames of a small candle, letting the metal grow warm. "If he's a deceiver," she said, loud enough for the ancestors to hear, "let his lies be revealed. If he's innocent—" She swallowed hard. "Then let my heart find peace." The chain began to glow in the candlelight, and for a moment, Adana swore she could see another woman's hands wearing it, hear another woman's laughter echoing in the metal. "Ada?" Ngozi's voice was barely a breath. "Look." On the other side of the clearing, a shadow moved between the trees. Then another, and another. Adana's blood turned to ice water in her veins as 3 figures stepped into the moonlight. But these weren't spirits or ancestors come to answer her prayers. They were very much alive. The first was a woman, tall, graceful, with the kind of beauty that made men forget their own names. Even in the dim light, Adana could see the resemblance to the face in the photograph. The same high cheekbones, the same proud carriage. Behind her stood two men Adana didn't recognize, but their expensive clothes and confident postures marked them as Lagos people, city people with city secrets. So, the woman said, her voice carrying the cultured accent of someone who'd been educated abroad. You're the village girl who thinks she can steal my husband. Adana's mouth went dry as dust. Your husband? The woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Did he tell you about me? About our two children? About the house we built together in Victoria Island? She stepped closer, and Adana could smell her perfume. Expensive, foreign, nothing like the palm kernel oil the village women used. Or did he fill your head with stories about being free to marry? You're lying. But even as Adana said it, she knew it wasn't true. Everything about this woman screamed legitimacy. The confident way she held herself, the expensive jewelry that caught the moonlight, the casual cruelty in her voice that spoke of someone who'd never had to fight for anything. Am I? The woman reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick folder. Even in the darkness, Adana could see official stamps, government seals, marriage certificate dated 3 years ago, birth certificates for our children, bank documents showing joint accounts. She dropped the folder at Adana's feet. Your precious Chike has been living 2 lives, and you are about to become his dirty little secret in the village. Ngozi made a small sound of shock, but Adana couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The truth hit her like a falling tree, crushing everything she thought she knew about her life. Why? She finally whispered. Why are you telling me this? The woman's smile was sharp as a razor blade. Because, my dear, we have a common problem, and I think it's time we solved it together. One of the men stepped forward, and in his hand Adana saw something that made her blood freeze. A thick envelope stuffed with money. And beneath it, photographs of Chika that made the wedding picture look like a love song. The silence in the church was deafening. Adana stood at the altar, her wedding dress now feeling like a costume in a play she'd never auditioned for. The photograph, that cursed photograph, lay crumpled at her feet where she dropped it moments before. Every eye in the packed church was on her, on Chiki, on the woman who just walked through those heavy wooden doors. The woman from the picture, in flesh and blood. Chiki's face had drained of all color, his mouth moving without sound like a fish gasping for air. His best man stepped closer, confusion written across his features, but Chike waved him away with a trembling hand. Adana, Chike whispered, his voice barely audible over the shocked murmurs rippling through the congregation. I can explain. Explain? The word tore from her throat like a scream. Explain how you're already married? Explain how you let my family, spend everything we had on this lie. The woman, she looked exactly like her photograph, maybe prettier, stood frozen in the doorway. Her own traditional wrapper was simple, faded, like she traveled far to get here. Her eyes weren't angry, they were broken. Pastor Johnson cleared his throat, his weathered hands gripping his Bible. Perhaps we should. No. Adana's mother rose from her seat in the front pew, her voice cutting through the air like a machete. Let him speak. Let this man who calls himself worthy of my daughter explain himself before God and all these witnesses. The smell of incense and fresh flowers felt suffocating now. What had seemed holy moments before now felt like a tomb. Adana could hear her father's heavy breathing behind her, the sound of a man whose pride was crumbling in public. Chike took a step toward her, his hand extended. Ada, please. It's not what you think. Don't. She backed away, her heel catching in the church runner. Don't call me that. Don't call me anything. The woman in the doorway finally spoke, her voice soft but clear enough to carry through the stunned silence. I didn't come to stop your wedding, she said, looking directly at Adana. I came because he promised me he would tell you the truth. We have children together. Children. The word hit Adana like a physical blow. She gripped the altar rail to keep from falling, her knuckles white against the dark wood. Around her, the wedding guests erupted in shocked whispers. Someone gasped. A baby cried. Normal sounds that felt obscene in this moment of revelation. How many? Adana heard herself ask. 3, the woman replied. The youngest is barely walking. Chiki's best man grabbed his arm. Brother, what is this? What have you done? But Chike was staring at Adana, his eyes pleading. I was going to divorce her. I was going to make things right. I just needed time. Time? Adana's laugh came out harsh and bitter. Time to what? Lie to another woman? Build another family on false promises? Her father stood up slowly, his large frame shaking with rage. Papa had always been gentle, but now his voice carried the weight of ancestral judgment. In all my years, I have never seen such shame brought to a sacred place. The church felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. The beautiful flowers her aunties had arranged looked wilted, the ribbons and decorations suddenly cheap and false. Everything beautiful had turned ugly in the space of minutes. Pastor Johnson stepped forward, his face grave. Young man, is this true? Are you married to this woman? Chike's silence was answer enough. And the children? Another silence. The pastor closed his Bible with a sharp snap that echoed through the church like a gunshot. Then this ceremony cannot proceed. What God has joined together in holy matrimony, let no man put asunder. You are already bound, son. Adana felt something break inside her chest, not her heart that had broken the moment she found the photograph. This was deeper. This was her trust in the world, her belief that good things could happen to good people, her faith that love was real and not just another transaction. She looked at her parents, at her aunties and uncles who'd saved money for months to attend this wedding, at her friends who'd helped her prepare, at the neighbors who brought gifts they could barely afford, all of them staring at her with pity. Pity was worse than anger. I should have listened to the signs, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Mama always said, when a man won't bring you to meet his people, it's because he already has people he's hiding from. She bent down and picked up her bouquet, white roses and baby's breath that had cost her father a week's wages. For a moment she held it close, breathing in their sweetness one last time. Then she threw it, not to the unmarried women waiting behind her, but directly at Chike's chest. Take this to your real wife, she said, her voice steady now, deadly calm. Tell her I'm sorry for the pain you've caused us both. As she walked down the aisle, not as a bride now, but as a woman reclaiming her dignity, she could hear the woman in the doorway whisper to her children, who must have been waiting outside. Come, little ones, your papa has some explaining to do. But Adana didn't look back. Behind her, she could hear Chike calling her name, could hear her mother weeping, could hear the wedding guests beginning to shuffle and whisper, the sound of a celebration dying. And somewhere in that dying sound, she swore she could hear her grandmother's voice again, clearer now. The truth is like palm oil, my child. No matter how deep you bury it, it will always rise to the surface. As she pushed through the church doors into the blinding afternoon sun, Adana realized the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was wondering how many other lies were still buried, waiting to surface. The silence in the compound was deafening. Where hours before there had been music and laughter, now only the distant sound of car engines fading into the evening remained. Adana sat alone under the Iroko tree, still wearing her wedding dress, now stained with tears and dust from when she'd fallen to her knees in front of everyone. The empty chairs stood like tombstones around her. Paper decorations fluttered in the evening breeze, mocking what should have been the happiest day of her life. Her mother approached slowly, carrying a clay cup of palm wine. Mama's face looked 10 years older than it had this morning. The lines around her eyes had deepened, carved by shame and heartbreak. Drink, Mama said simply, settling beside her daughter on the wooden bench. Adana took the cup but didn't drink. The palm wine smelled sweet and earthy, like the soil after rain, like promises that turned to dust. The guests are all gone, she whispered. Yes? And Chike? Gone too, with Obioma. Mama's voice caught on the other woman's name. They left in his uncle's car. He didn't even look back. Adana laughed, a sound like breaking glass. 9 years, Mama. 9 years he was married to her. While he was courting me, while he was asking Papa for my hand, while we were planning this wedding, he had a wife. Her mother's hand found hers, warm and steady. Some people are good at wearing masks, my daughter. Even we who love you couldn't see through his. The compound was growing dark now. Someone, probably Ngozi, had lit a kerosene lantern near the kitchen, its flame dancing against the mud walls. The smell of the feast they prepared still hung in the air, but it would go to waste now. All of it. Obioma knew, Adana said suddenly. When she came today, she wasn't surprised. She was sad, like she'd been expecting this moment for a long time. Perhaps she was. They sat in silence as the stars began to appear. From somewhere in the village, a night bird called, "Kwa kwa kwa," lonely and insistent. "What will people say?" Adana asked. "Let them talk." Mama's voice was fiercer than Adana expected. "You did nothing wrong. You loved honestly. You trusted completely. There is no shame in that." But there was shame. Adana could feel it burning in her chest, mixing with the anger and humiliation. The way the guests had whispered as the truth came out. The way some of the older women had shaken their heads, as if somehow this was her fault for not knowing. "I should have asked more questions," she said. "Should have wondered why he never took me to Lagos. Why I never met his family until today. Should have." "Should have what?" Papa's voice cut through the darkness. He emerged from the house, moving slowly like an old man, though he wasn't yet 50. "Should have been a detective instead of a loving woman. Should have suspected every word from a man you trusted." He sat heavily on her other side, the bench creaking under his weight. "I failed you," he said quietly. "I was so pleased with his university degree, his good job, his respectful manner. I forgot to ask the deeper questions. A man's character matters more than his certificates." Adana leaned against her father's shoulder, breathing in his familiar smell of tobacco and wood smoke. "We all failed to see Papa. He was very good at hiding." "But not good enough," Mama said with grim satisfaction. "Truth always finds a way to the surface. Your grandmother used to say, 'When the foundation is crooked, even the strongest house will fall,'" Adana finished. She was right. They sat together as the night deepened around them. One by one, the sounds of the village settled into sleep, children's voices fading, cooking fires dying down, doors being barred for the night. Finally, Papa cleared his throat. "What will you do now, my daughter?" For the first time since the morning's terrible discovery, Adana felt something other than pain and shame, something like possibility. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I know what I won't do. I won't hide. I won't let this break me, and I won't let fear stop me from trusting again when the right person comes." "That's my girl," Mama whispered. Adana stood up, the wedding dress rustling around her feet. She reached into the folds of fabric and pulled out the photograph, crumpled now, but still clear enough to see Chike's face beside his real wife. Without hesitation, she walked to where the cooking fire still smoldered and dropped the picture into the glowing coals. It caught immediately, curling and blackening until there was nothing left but ash. "Some secrets are meant to be burned," she said, watching the last flames die away. When she turned back to her parents, she was no longer the naive girl who had woken up expecting to be married today. She was something harder, wiser. Someone who had looked betrayal in the face and chosen to survive it. The wedding dress would go back in the box. The plans would be forgotten. The gifts would be returned. But Adana would remain. And sometimes that's the only victory that matters. As she walked toward the house, her mother called softly behind her. "Ada?" "Yes, Mama?" "Your grandmother would be proud." Adana smiled, her first real smile since morning, because she knew it was true. The night wind stirred the ashes of the photograph, scattering them like dust beneath the old Iroko tree, and with them went the last piece of the man who had tried to steal her future, but failed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts.